In this episode, I interview my good friend, Coach Ross Hillier. He's an awesome coach, he's an awesome human being, and I can't wait to share this conversation with you. What I would like to ask of you is to check out his links, check out his website, check out his podcast, the Nomad Strength Show. Look at his Instagram. This guy has a lot of good stuff going on, and I think he's just a winner in life. He's not one of those types that whines about the weather and, what people said to him. He's a go-getter. And I think that each of us should have friends like Ross. He's a good guy to connect with, to follow, and I hope you'll check out the links below. But let's get into the chat. You're listening to the Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips, where we present audiobook quality readings of the classics for your enjoyment. Thank you for stopping by. And remember, just because you're a bumpkin doesn't mean you can't be cultured. Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. Today I have a very good friend, Ross Hillier, joining me via phone. And remember last episode when I had bad audio and I said the next episode would be better? Well, I lied. And this one isn't much better, but you know what? We're going to do it anyway because, I'm stubborn like that. Ross, thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped. This is going to be a fun one to talk to, and I just haven't talked to you for a while.
I know, it has been a while. And just by way of, I guess, the connection there is, I think I found you on Instagram. I like what you post with regard to, fitness and things like that. And we'll talk about that, sort of your philosophy, which is different than how I was sort of raised, let's say in the Army, everybody is, after PT, you go to the gym, you do some bicep curls and some bench press and leg press and just drink all kinds of horrific cocktails that you get at GNC to produce different effects in your body and whatever. And Ross that's not his, that's not your thing. And I like that. And I'm drawn to it. And we'll talk about that. But anyway, he's a good friend, a smart guy, very cerebral. He likes to read. And that's kind of the reason he's on here is because we'll just get into it. But Russ, tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I guess what I do is coach. That's always a profession that gets tied to people's identities a lot. But I always like to say, I just coach. I do coaching. I am not a coach. Like that's what I do for a profession and for a living. But I've been in the fitness and health space for almost a decade now. I was an athlete in college, did track and field and football for a couple years in college, but I did track all 4 years. And I was always heavily involved in athletics and just loved the training part of it, the stuff in the weight room, almost more than the sport itself in a lot of instances. And so when I got out of college and I was trying to find something to do, and I was ultimately finding a job in the new town because I was following my then girlfriend, now wife, to the town that she was moving to. And I said, I'll just find a job. And I got a job at a gym. And I had a couple of certifications at that point already. And so they brought me in as a trainer. And a couple years after that, I left, started my own thing, and have been coaching in my own business, doing it ever since. That's been like 6 years now. And then I've done 3 years exclusively online, which has been fun. But I just have always loved the training aspect of things and how I can help make that more accessible to as many people as possible. And then in the last couple of years, starting right around the time that, I'm sure we'll probably get into it, but right around the time that you joined one of the programs that I was coaching, I made the shift to focusing on coaching specifically men. And a lot of that had to do more with, I was coaching and teaching things that I needed to hear myself. And so, who do I relate to? Well, other men that are in similar positions as myself, we're got maybe probably young kids, maybe a lot of the guys I work with end up having some sort of business they own, whether it's their priority or maybe it's like a side business that they're trying to make into something where they've got a little bit of drive to pursue entrepreneurship to some degree. So there's a lot of those, similarities and connection points that I share with a lot of the guys that I end up coaching, and that's kind of by design because a lot of these things I coach, like I said, I need them as much as anybody else. So it's more like I'm talking to myself when I coach a lot of these things, go over a lot of these concepts.
Right. The I loved taking your course. It was a 6-week course, I think.
Yeah,
This was 2021, I think, spring of 2021.
I believe so.
It
Yeah.
was really good. It was so varied. There was so much, it was sandbag carrying, and
Mm-hmm.
you could work out, in my case, at home barefooted in the garage. There wasn't a going to a gym and asking permission, signing in, anything like that. Nobody else. I could wear what I want, play what music I want, be as obnoxious, yell as loud as I wanted to. Just be
That's
myself.
how you got to do it.
Right. And very primal. I like that. And
Yes.
but one thing that I noticed that was really cool that you had in the program was reading. And that's
Mm.
just not something that you see in a lot of fitness and wellness programs is reading. Why would
Yeah,
you why would you put that in there?
that's a good question. To give a kind of 30,000-foot answer first, the way I like to describe coaching in the fitness space is it's really about personal development, right? And the reason that I coach fitness instead of being a psychiatrist or a psychologist, even though we're essentially doing the same thing to a degree, is because I just like to work out, right? And I believe that the fitness part of it is oftentimes the lowest hanging fruit for a lot of people to begin to make positive changes, right? We can talk about all these, these emotional, these mental things that maybe a lot of people need to work on, and those can seem really daunting because it's not really material in a lot of senses. So like, what kind of things do I need to be doing practically to work on my mental health or my emotional health or anything like that? But everybody can sweat and make the decision to like go do something physically active. So that's like usually the first barrier that we cross is, well, I'm going to go in and work hard for 20 minutes. Maybe it's only 20 minutes, right? Like it doesn't have to be some giant thing. Like, from a lot of these workouts, a lot of them are like one or two movements and you just don't stop for 20 minutes. And it's like, that you would think I would need more than that, but you really don't. And so when we look at it as personal development, I kind of like the holistic approach to it, where yes, the fitness part's there, but what are we doing when we're not in the gym or when we're not training? And that comes into nutrition, obviously, but that also comes into all your other daily practices. And keeping your mind sharp is just as important for your actual physical health as the training of your physical body is. And so I usually would put in, a lot of times it was things that I just enjoyed reading. And then I kind of went to the route of here's some things that are actually pretty effective for developing maybe positive habit systems. Like, how do I develop habits? And so there's a lot of, there's some in the self-help side of things, but a lot of what it comes down to for me when we talk about what am I reading or what books are we, not prescribing, but suggesting in the programs, it's more about the act itself than what the content is in a lot of instances, because the act of reading is a gateway to so many cool things in life, where whether it be just your ability to take in stories. And that's why I love nonfiction a lot. Like I just love being able to or excuse me, that's why I love fiction a lot, is because I can go in and shut down and like just enjoy a story that has like no real world implications on anything. I don't have to think, like I can just go and be immersed in a world, in a story. And so I actually recommend a lot of those kind of books for that reason. We're so stressed anymore just as a culture, and there's so many things going on day to day life that we tend to really bottle up in a lot of ways. And so we have training as one of those outlets physically, but mentally we need one of those outlets as well. And that's why I like to prescribe books that'll make you think, but also ones that you can just use to escape and like just go enjoy and read. And most of the time it's like, hey, go read 10 pages. But I say 10 pages because I know most of the time, if you get 10 pages in, you're going to read more. Like, that's just how it goes. Like, but we want that habit to be the thing that is so easy to accomplish. You're building the momentum by being able to do it every single day. So if I were to say instead, like, I want you to read 100 pages a day, nobody's going to do that. Like, because it's just too daunting of a number to make a daily habit. But if I say read 5 pages, read 10 pages a day, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can, that's actually pretty easy. Are you sure you don't want me to do more? Be like, no, read 10 pages. Because then if you get to 10 pages and you're like, I got 5 more minutes, I'll read 5 more pages or whatever. Then you've built that habit and enjoying it because you're accomplishing it day to day rather than setting some huge thing that you know you're never going to do and then getting disappointed in the fact that you don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, build that small momentum of positive changes. And then over time, that number will go up as it becomes more part of your daily habit. Maybe you started at 10 pages and it was there for a month, and now it's at 20 pages. And because I can read 20 pages a lot quicker than I thought. And it just continues to grow up from there. Just like training. So if we're training hard or whatever, we start at a lighter weight until you get stronger. Then you start using heavier weights. It's the exact same thing when we're talking about how what we consume, whether it's reading or music or anything like that.
What about like what does reading do to your mind and body that playing a video game doesn't do? Because some people say, I just want to relax and watch a TV show. How
Sure.
is that different? How is reading different than that?
I think the visuals of the other two examples, like TV, movies, video games, whatever, they don't allow for your imagination. Like, I believe like your imagination is a muscle that you have to learn to flex as much as anything else. And that allows for a lot of creativity to happen, right? Like, I remember reading books when I was younger, and I was a reading fiend when I was younger. I don't know if you guys in the South did the accelerated reader program or whatever in school. I was reading, 600-page chapter books when I was like in second grade, just because I was like mowing through them, right? But what I remember doing, and this is a funny example because I remember it the very first time with the first Harry Potter books, because they came out like I was like first, second grade or whatever when the first one came out. So I was like mowing through these books as a young kid and creating these worlds in my head that I had no visual analogy to. Like, there was nothing created yet. None of the movies were out. Like, none of that was there. So I'm like creating all of this stuff in my head. And then when the movie comes out, there was almost a level of like being kind of bummed out because I thought some of the stuff that I came up with was better than what was on the screen.
Right.
Like, in my head as a 7-year-old, I'm like, why didn't they look like this or whatever? Like, when talking about some of these creatures. But I think that what reading does is it allows you to dig into those parts of your mind and be creative in a way that just watching something doesn't. Like, I think you can maybe feel emotions differently when you're watching something because there's that visual connection. You feel it differently because it's almost like you're seeing something in person. But reading it, you get to create a lot of that yourself. And I think there's a lot of really cool power in that a lot of people lose that ability. And you see that as you get older. People don't read. Like, creativity is I believe, like a use it or lose it type of thing. And so I want to keep that as sharp as anything else I do fitness wise. So that's why I encourage a lot of actual book reading.
I love that. I think you're exactly right. It kind of it turns on your imagination part of your brain, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
in that, for you personally, what would be some recommendations for, let's say, fiction that, and it doesn't have to be classic. I mean, it could be anything. What would you, if someone said, I think you've convinced me, I want to do more reading, what would you tell them to read?
Man, I mean, you say it doesn't have to be classic, but I'm looking at my little bookshelf right here on my desk, and like the 3 things right next to each other that are right next to each other are C.S. Lewis and every Tolkien work right there. And so I'm like, that's like always on my bookshelf. And so that's one of those like rereadable ones that I don't think I mean, that's the reason they're classics, right? Like any of those Tolkien works, I even have like Silmarillion there. And those kind of things I love because of the in-depth world building that took place. And that's where like you really get to flex, like I said, that imagination when you're reading that stuff, because it's so easy because of how well descriptive and creative he was in building all of this stuff. And I know a lot of people that have not even read the original Lord of the Rings books, but love the movies. And I'm like, man, there's so much in the books that is not in the movies, even though the movies are great, but it's a totally different experience when you go through those. So I love the classic stuff like that. And so, I mean, I have like literally like the complete works of like the signature classics combination thing from C.S. Lewis. Like I love Screw Tape. That's one of my favorites. There's what else do I have right here? I'm just like looking at my immediate vicinity because this is all the stuff that I like generally read like frequently or more than once. But in the last couple of years, I know that we've talked about this before, but the last couple of years in the fiction genre, I've loved all the Jack Carr novels. They're just like a fun kind of experience to go through because of how descriptive he is, and he's a really big gearhead when it comes to stuff. So he's very descriptive on like exactly what type of gear, and he's painting the picture of like James Reese is drinking this coffee out of this mug. He's got this knife in his pocket, and like I know all of those things, and like because of some of the similar connections, like even you and I have. I know some of those people that have created those things, which is really cool. And so like I get really into it that way. But there's 5 of those novels right now, and the 6th one's going to come out like this spring sometime. And now they've built the Amazon series, the Terminal List, based off of his novels, which is kind of cool. But even that, like to tie back to another example, I loved the first book so much. I was kind of bummed in some of the stuff that they didn't portray. I wish they would have in the first season. But those are great because those are I love them because they're intense, and that's kind of the one that I every time one of those books has come out, I'll get it. And I've been kind of lucky the last 2 years because I've had him on my podcast each of the last 2 years to kind of promo the book. So I got it a little bit early to read before he came on the show. And I'd get it in the mail, and it was like literally a day and a half and the book's done. And it just because like that's one of those like thriller spy novel type of things that are just like fun to read. Like, and that's like almost what I enjoy about the fiction genre is it's just more fun. Like I still have all my nonfiction stuff that relates to the stuff that I do for my work and for training and health. And there's all of these cool things that I like. And the self-help genre is really great, but I just like having fun reading every once in a while. And so that's why I go towards the more fiction stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
With all of your personal development that you do, I think that's very interesting that you specifically like fiction, because some people are kind of boring about it, where it's like read all these self-help books, and I don't know, it never gives your brain a chance to relax and kind of be a kid.
Well, and it kind of just feels like I'm working
right
when I read those things, because that's so much of what I do anyway. So like even if I'm reading it for for leisure or whatever, it's still kind of what I do all day. So it feels like I'm still doing something for work rather than just like taking a break and just shutting down and getting immersed in a story the same way somebody would just turn on a movie or like a show that they watch. It's the same thing. And I still do that too, but there's those things where if I want to even remove myself further from that and immerse more into a story, like that's where I'll go in a lot of those fiction novels and stuff, which are fun.
That's great. That's really cool. So with regard to nonfiction, what are some recommendations?
I enjoy historical nonfiction. I was like one class away from getting a history minor in college, and that was just because I couldn't take the class so I was kind of bummed that I wasn't able to do that. But I love history, and that's one of the things that like you and I bond over a lot when we were hanging out in South Carolina, and we were talking about all the history of that area, and it's so cool. And so that's one of the things that I really enjoy. So I've got, a bunch of historical fiction. David McCullough is one of my favorites. He has some great stuff. 1776 by him is awesome. I mentioned a little bit before, but the rise of Theodore Roosevelt is one of my favorite like biographical works. It's so cool, and he was such a rad guy to learn about and read about. Really nobody like him. So I really enjoy a lot of the historical nonfiction as more so than anything really related to health or fitness or self-help, because that's a lot of that genre anymore. It kind of just seems like everybody's got a self-help book to some degree, and that's pretty much all that exists in the nonfiction world, unless you're like researching something, right? But for the same reason that I enjoy the fiction is I enjoy kind of getting transported back to whatever time period or whatever it is I'm reading about in the historical sense, to really dive into that world or whoever it is I'm learning about that time.
Speaking of Theodore Roosevelt, you have a do you mind reading that for us? Because I think this excerpt from a speech, it really reminds me of you and the products and services you offer and what you try to achieve with your clients. It really, I think it's really good. So, yeah, can you read that for us?
Yeah, this is from Teddy Roosevelt's speech. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ron. This has been great, bookish conversation that I love. And where can people find podcast and connect on social media, that kind of thing?
Yeah, thanks, man. Everything is, if you just search Nomad Strength on pretty much any platform, I'll show up. Nomad-strength.com is the website. The podcast is the Nomad Strength Show. It's on all podcast platforms. We're coming up on episode like 200 or something like that in a couple of, like around, I think, the beginning of April. And that's been a really fun project. Coach Ross Hillier, pretty much everywhere else if you're looking for my accounts on Instagram, Twitter, anything like that. And that's pretty much it. I'm not difficult to find, for better or worse, I guess. So,
and it's a great podcast. I listen myself. There was a episode a while back where you had Corey Hawk, and one of the things y'all talked about was raising chickens. And that was the episode that I went out and bought chickens right after that.
That's so great.
Like, so this is an influential podcast we're discussing here, and
that's great.
The link will be in the show notes, so check that out. Definitely go give him a listen and a follow, because he's got some good stuff that he puts out frequently. Definitely a good guy to follow. Ross, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, man. I had a great time.
You've been listening to The Cultured Bumpkin, a literature podcast with Jake Phillips. Thank you very much for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this, would you mind going and subscribing and leaving a nice review on whatever podcast platform you heard this on? I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.